I am Miley Jarrett, and I am the volunteer coordinator at 350 PDX. 350 PDX is a grassroots organization in Portland. We're a chapter of the international group 350.org, and we are focused on mobilizing people, like regular people, to tackle climate change. Recently, we've seen a few immediate impacts of climate change, and one of those is on salmon runs in Portland. Portland is one of the only urban centers in the United States that has salmon in the city, which is pretty special for us. And there have been a lot of local efforts to restore our creeks and streams to support salmon in larger numbers and higher up into the creek where they should go. Last year, the temperatures around Portland were very, very high all summer long. And as a result, the temperature of the water and the creeks that the salmon swim through was too high to support salmon. And we had massive die-offs. As we see climate change advance even further, we predict that the air temperature will continue to increase in this area, even if it's just by little amounts. Those small amounts affect salmon in massive, massive numbers.
Michael Milstein. I'm a public affairs officer for NOAA Fisheries West Coast Region. NOAA stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's basically the federal agency that watches over the atmosphere and the oceans. Climate change overall is a big topic. It encompasses the atmosphere, the ocean, and all those things that affect the place that we live and wildlife and plants around us. Last summer, for instance, there was a real serious issue on the Columbia River, and you probably know salmon migrate out to the ocean and then migrate back up to the river. Well, last year, the sockeye salmon, it was one of the biggest returns of sockeye salmon that we've ever had in the Northwest, but because it had been a very warm winter, we had very little snow, and so the rivers were getting very warm, and salmon, as you probably know, prefer cold water. They have to have cold water to survive, and the water turned out to be much warmer than they could handle, and we lost thousands and thousands of salmon on the river. So NOAA and the Coast Guard work very cooperatively in a number of areas. I mentioned law enforcement. The Coast Guard is also very helpful with research. Our ships often are in similar areas, and so they keep track of each other and can sometimes assist each other in terms of taking samples and other research that goes on out in the ocean.
I'm Lieutenant Abby Harm. So I am a marine inspector, so I go out on board vessels and just inspect them for safety and security and for environmental protection. There are some boats out in the Pacific and other places that indiscriminately fish with huge high seas drift net boats that are 2.2 kilometers long or longer, and they just leave them up and they catch everything. So the Coast Guard sets up patrols with our Coast Guard cutters every summer, and we go out and try and interdict those boats that are illegally fishing indiscriminately for, usually they end up getting like a ton of shark fins. They'll find those on board, and salmon and tuna. With salmon, it's an anadromous fish, so it's not just localized in one area, so it's not really just monitored by the state, although the state does check up on the salmon. It's also federally managed because it goes out across the Pacific and comes all the way back in. So we get involved to make sure that those fish, aren't being illegally fished on their way back across the Pacific and into their home streams.